Welcome to the beautiful village of Walsingham, a place of unique importance to English Catholicism. In this programme, we'll uncover the spiritual treasures of this special and holy place and find out why it continues to attract pilgrims from all over the world still today. Located in the beautiful Norfolk countryside, just a few miles away from the sea, this tiny, sleepy village of Walsingham boasts an impressive past, and one that I'm keen to find out about from those who are here.
The history of Walsingham is very distinguished and starts, we believe, in the 11th century when Edward, king and confessor, now St Edward, was on the throne in about 1061. And Richeldis, a noble woman living in the village, very devout person, wanted to do something for Our Lady. And she persisted in her prayer and in her request. And eventually, Richeldis heard Our Lady saying to her, build a replica of the Holy House of Nazareth in Walsingham, in the village. Now, the Holy House of Nazareth isn't the house of Jesus, Mary and Joseph, but the house of Mary and her parents, whom we call Joachim and Anne. And so this was built, it was a simple building of wood, which eventually was surrounded by stone. And the Augustinian priests came and built a large priory, and they were the priests who looked after the Holy House. The Franciscan friars, the Grey Friars, also moved into the village. And Walsingham became a great place of pilgrimage. The Middle Ages were, I suppose, like today, great times of pilgrimage, people wanting to either to do penance or just out of piety to make a pilgrimage. And Walsingham was one of the great places at that time. So you have Rome, you had the Holy Land, you had Santiago in Spain, and Walsingham. And Walsingham, because of the Holy House, was known as England's Nazareth. And so whereas in the Middle Ages, when it was difficult to get to the Holy Land for all sorts of reasons, it was possible to get to Walsingham. And many people came. Monarch after monarch came to Walsingham, including Henry VIII, more than once. Henry VIII walked barefoot from here to the Holy House in the village. So it was a very popular place and a place of great spirituality, prayer, and healing and grace.
So the house was built and in 1061, and it remained as a local place of pilgrimage until the reign of King Henry III, and that was 1226. So 1226, King Henry III took a very great interest in Walsingham. He was obviously very moved by it on his visit. He made 11 visits. And he encouraged the Augustinian canons who were looking after the Holy House to build and extend their priory. And he was very generous with his gifts. He gave a lot of oak, wood and trees to extend the house and the shrine. And not only that, but he was a very devout man, and he gave a beautiful chasuble, he gave other gifts, and in particular, he gave a gold crown for Our Lady of Walsingham. When the Holy House was built, there was no statue in it. That came later, probably around 1226. There's a statue in the V&A Museum in London, which could even be the original statue of Our Lady of Walsingham. It was carved with a band round the head for a gold crown. In other words, it wasn't just a statue that anybody could buy if they had the money to buy it, because that would have had a carved wooden crown on it. But this was made for a gold crown, certainly a metal crown. And it could be that it's the original statue. And so 1226 would be about the date the statue was put in the Holy House. And it may have been Henry III who was instrumental in that, and he certainly gave the crown for it. It became very famous, did the shrine of Walsingham. People went on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, of course. From early days, they went on pilgrimage to Rome. But England had this shrine, which was a copy of Nazareth, and it gave the name England's Nazareth to Walsingham. Pilgrims came here from all over England and from Scotland. Robert the Bruce came here. He was very sick, and I think at that time England was at war with Scotland, and he was given permission by the king to have safe passage and protection, and came on pilgrimage here to pray to be healed. King David of Scotland also came. So it was for the whole of the United Kingdom. This was a shrine of great importance.
Here I'm standing just outside the entrance of the Abbey site, and in many ways this is the centre of the Walsingham story. Here inside at the ruins of the old Abbey, we get a sense of the history of this extraordinary place, also a sense of its former grandeur and importance in the Christian pilgrimage tradition. It's amazing to think that in centuries gone by, Walsingham was counted among the 4 most important pilgrimage sites in the whole Christian world, alongside Rome and Jerusalem and Santiago de Compostela in Spain.
"25 miles away from here is the port of King's Lynn, and that was a major port. In fact, Norfolk, this very quiet area of Norfolk, East Anglia, was highly populated in the Middle Ages. Norwich, our county town, was the second city only to London, so it was vastly important to East Anglia, and pilgrims came from the continent of Europe through the port of King's Lynn, made their way here to Walsingham. Erasmus, the great scholar who visited Walsingham, said it was the ambition of every English person, he said he was thinking of England, to visit Walsingham at least once in their lifetime. And of course, for the majority of people, that meant walking here, very, very long journeys. Noblemen came, noble women came, and they would of course travel here on horseback. Every king and queen of England came here to Walsingham from the reign of Henry III until the reign of Henry VIII.
That golden era in Walsingham's history didn't last forever. Walsingham faced its biggest challenge with the arrival of the English Reformation, which swept across this pilgrimage heartland and changed its landscape forever.
The grandness of the place is the premier pilgrimage site in England. Not always necessarily well under the surface. In fact, there were reports in the early 1500s that the priors here were carousing the local taverns, that perhaps the wealth had gone to their heads and that they were misusing it. And that triggered a visit from one of the local bishops in the early 1500s to say to them, look, we need to get this house in order. Now, that was an element that Thomas Cromwell then played on when he came to dissolve the monasteries. We're looking at, he said, irregularities that need to be quashed, and therefore I'm coming in to close you down. Even though Thomas Cromwell made it a political move to come in and close the abbey down, it also had economic and social ramifications. So those who worked in the village, worked for the abbey, worked in all the hostelries and pubs and taverns around the area, they were going to be impacted by the removal of the wealth and the patronage and the pilgrim visits that came into Walsingham. The sub-prior of the abbey at the time, Nicholas Milton, was implicated in a revolt, let's say, which seemed to be a protest against the abbey closing down. It may have been for religious reasons, it may have also been for these economic reasons. And on very flimsy evidence, he was arrested, apparently, according to legends, taken across to what's now Dowry House and left in the cellar and tortured, and then taken out to, beyond the abbey walls to be hanged. But this just shows the degree to which there was real resistance against the closure of the abbey. And this resistance was tackled almost stone by stone as the place, over the subsequent years, was ripped apart, wiped off the face of the earth almost. And not only that, we hear that the statue of Our Lady of Walsingham was at some point in the few years after transported to London along with other artifacts and burnt. Although there is some evidence that actually it may well be in the Victoria and Albert Museum. Who knows? But as you can see, the place was literally almost swept off the face of the earth. And what is remaining is the lonely arch behind us as a reminder of what its glory and prestige once was.
But this was a land grab in England. It was purely to get hands on the money of the church. And so the monasteries were destroyed, and the shrines, they were destroyed along with it. And gradually, the Catholic Church in England was moved by Thomas Cranmer into a more Lutheran situation. For Walsingham, it must have been an absolute disaster, and other places where there were great shrines. You know, the whole of the village of Walsingham, when you walk down the high street, all those houses down there were all built to accommodate pilgrims. Hundreds and thousands of pilgrims who came in. They were all built to provide resting places for them, places to stay, places to eat and drink. Services were provided for the pilgrims, and suddenly it was stopped. The last pilgrim came, and it all ended.
Despite the enormous challenges that this shrine faced with the backlash of zealous reformers, and though the walls of the historic abbey crumbled over the decades, the embers of the ancient pilgrimage site remained. The message and the spirit of this place was not to be lost, but would soon be rediscovered, resurrected, and brought back to life again.
After the Reformation in the 16th century, the shrine was utterly destroyed, the statue of Our Lady of Walsingham was taken away for destruction, and everything ended. Some buildings were still around, including the chapel you can see behind me, which we call the Slipper Chapel. But this was used for secular purposes. But there was a remarkable woman called Charlotte Boyd, who was an Anglican, wealthy, single woman, the end of the 19th century, who was a prayerful person and wanted to do good, and she established orphanages. She had money, and she wanted to buy the original shrine where the Holy House was from the Walsingham estate and the family who owned the estate, and the owner would not let her have it. But out of pity for her, he said he would sell her the Slipper Chapel. Many people believe it's called the Slipper Chapel because as the last place of prayer before reaching the shrine in the village, people would take off their shoes or their slippers and walk barefoot into the village. Well, this took some time to negotiate and all the ins and outs. And in the meantime, Charlotte Boyd went on retreat to Belgium, to a Catholic convent. And while she was there, decided that God was calling her to become a Catholic. So by the time she got back and the Slipper Chapel was sold to her, she was a Catholic. So the Catholic Church obtained this chapel. Now that's all well and good, but the Bishop of Northampton, because this was in the Diocese of Northampton until 1976, was reluctant to accept this chapel, partly because at the end of the 19th century, the parish of King's Lynn, which is 20 odd miles away, had built a chapel, a holy house, if you like, onto the Catholic parish church there, and that was a place of pilgrimage. Indeed, it's called the Pontifical Shrine because it was established by the Pope, I think Leo XIII. So he was reluctant to take this chapel on, especially as a rectory, only a couple of Catholics in the village. So there was no priest to look after it, there was nobody to come to it. In 1934, Cardinal Bourne, Archbishop of Westminster, came here with 10,000 pilgrims and made this site the national shrine of Our Lady for England. And of course, people came in number down the years, and in 1982, the church of the Chapel of Our Lady of Reconciliation, which was built in the grounds to house the increasing number of pilgrims, was built, and people have not stopped coming to this day. As rector of the shrine, what I've noticed is the great diversity of pilgrims who come to the shrine, either as individuals, in family groups, parish groups, and people who are not Catholic at all. For example, we have two large pilgrimages of Tamil people, and they bring with them people of the Hindu faith who are their friends, who are related to them, and who also have a devotion to Our Lady. We have a lot of parish groups coming, and we have lots of individuals. And in the summer holidays and other holidays, we have families coming. And it's a great thing to see people coming with deep faith to honour Our Lady and to ask Our Lady for their needs. I've met a lot of people who come here saying they've come to ask Our Lady so that they can conceive a child. And then you meet other people who bring you a baby and say, this is the baby I asked for. So there's a great variety of people, and there's a great diversity of people, the heritage of people who come here. And people travel a great distance. I met a young man who had travelled down from Glasgow, 7-hour drive, or was it 9 hours? It's a long way. But he came just for the day. But people come from all over Britain, and indeed from abroad, and stay in our accommodation. We have over 100 beds down in the village, and we're able to welcome people in large groups, small groups, families, individuals. They can have a tailor-made pilgrimage or do what they like. The possibilities are endless, really.
These days, if you visit Walsingham, you're very likely to find throngs of pilgrims, individuals, families, school groups, bus groups from parishes, and also inquisitive tourists. They come to fill these narrow streets. This is the resurrection of this ancient pilgrimage site in the 21st century. And each one of them comes for their own different reasons. Pilgrims come carrying their personal prayer intentions, asking God to grant some favour in a place made holy by the presence of Mary and by the events that took place here 1,000 years ago.
I come to Walsingham to bring my wife, and this time my daughter, because I've been married to her for 56 years, and all those years I've been going around with her to every church service practically, and every shrine in Europe practically, and this is one of them. We actually came up here on holiday, and probably by chance found the cottage here, and it was just great to be here as opposed to being at the seaside. So we've just been coming here practically every day, and it's great. It's really lovely here.
So it's a parish tradition. They come every year, and I like to come every couple of years. It's a chance to get away from the hustle and bustle of life, living in a busy town, a busy job. It's a chance to get away to come for a bit of peace and quiet, really.
Each year we come to Walsingham, and the time of year that we come is this week generally, so it's just after the end of the school year. And so what we really hope to get each year from coming to Walsingham is an opportunity to give thanks for the school year. I work at a university, so the university, all the blessings that we've had over the course of the year, but also looking forward to the next year and asking Our Lady's blessing.
And it's not only Catholics who come here seeking God's favour. The beautiful Anglican shrine welcomes thousands of pilgrims each year, a sign that the old wounds and divisions between Catholics and Protestants have long since healed. Pilgrims here walk together and pray together, united by a love of God and our Blessed Mother.
Well, I've been to Walsingham about 6 or 7 times, spread over a few years. I tend not to come every year, but I'm always grateful when I am here. I find it such a restful and spiritual place, and it really does help.
As a family, we've been coming over 50 years. I mean, I'm 50 this year. I've been every year of my life. My father was an Anglican priest, and he organised the diocesan pilgrimage for many years. So it's a big part of our family. My mother's here, my sister, her family. And having been so many times, we've created a really strong bond with fellow pilgrims that have been coming as long as us, but also pilgrims that are new and get sort of blown away with the place.
It's nice to mix with other Christians, with other denominations. You know, we go to the Catholic shrine. We went yesterday, and we joined in their service there. And at home in Caerphilly, the church I go to, we have Stations of the Cross on a Friday, and then we go to the Catholic church the following Friday. They come to us, we mix together, which is lovely. You know, we get to know them. I mean, we know them. And Good Friday, the Catholic priest has arranged, we follow him around the town. He does the Stations of the Cross, and he asks people to read out in the town. It's really nice to, and any denomination can join in, which is really nice. It's really friendly, you know. It's a good, it's where it should be.
But it's very interesting when we come to Marian pilgrimage, and we discover that Our Lady, the Mother of God, can have this ecumenical dimension. And I always comment that we have these you know, the protecting veil, Our Lady of Mercy, where she spreads her arms, and you see her veil and her armophorion. And what we've discovered is that beneath the protection of Our Lady, there is room for so many people. And she brings together people who you may not be expecting to be under her protection together. And that's the reality here it's the reality in Walsingham, it's the reality in other places in Britain, where we're actually working together with people whom we wouldn't think would have any place for the Mother of God in their devotion, but they all respond to the motherhood. And in motherhood, she responds and brings together nonconformists together with Anglicans, together with Catholics, together with Orthodox people, together with people of no perhaps identified denominational loyalties, who respond to that motherhood. And I think that's what makes places like this incredibly important, and perhaps breaks down expectations, boundaries in the past that were really ingrained between communities who spoke in the language of suspicion, not quite understanding what this meant to other people. There's less them and us in places like this. There's only us. And it's quite an incredible journey. It's quite an incredible meeting to see who us can be in places like this. People perhaps whom we wouldn't worship with, pray with when we go away from this place, but here we're all together and we're all under that protection, and it's quite incredible. It's a great blessing.
Many of the pilgrims to Walsingham come to the Slipper Chapel, located a mile away from the old abbey site, and it too has a fascinating history.
built around 1360, and it was the last of a series of wayside chapels that led from all across the country of England to Walsingham. There are some still existing. There's one up in Yorkshire. There are several down in the southern side of Norfolk. And there's a particular one at King's Lynn called the Red Mount Chapel, and that I'll speak about shortly. But this is the Slipper Chapel. It is the national shrine of Our Lady for Roman Catholics in England, to give it its full title. And it was declared that in 1934. The building itself, as I've just said, is much older than that. But in England at the Reformation, which in Walsingham was around 1538, everything connected with the shrine was destroyed. There are a few pieces of ruin in the village that you'll no doubt see later in the film. But this chapel, which was the last of those that pilgrims would visit on their way to the original shrine in Walsingham, survived. We don't know why. Perhaps it wasn't thought important enough. It survived, but not as a chapel. It became a farm building. A farmhouse was built on the northern side of it, and behind the window here it was extended with a dwelling built over that window. And it became several things. As I say, it was a farm building. It was known to be a cowshed at one stage. We have a photograph of the cows coming out to walk along the lane outside. In the records of the local parish church, it talks of it being a workhouse where the poor of the parish would be housed once they could no longer maintain their own places and properties. So that's what it was like up until about the end of the 1890s. At the time that the parish priest in King's Lynn and the master of the Guild of Our Lady of Ransom petitioned Pope Leo XIII to re-establish a shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham in England, a woman called Charlotte Pearson Boyd, travelling through Norfolk, saw this, what was obviously originally a chapel, although it had this farm built beside it, and she set about buying it. She wasn't a Catholic at the time, but she did go to Belgium to a retreat in a place called Marad-Sou, and while there, she was received into the Catholic Church. The consequence of that was that she was buying this from the local estate, and the funds that she was going to use were tied up in the Anglican Church, and she ended up paying for this out of her own pocket. So she bought this chapel, gave it to the Catholic Church. There were no Catholics in this area at the time because the shrine hadn't been re-established. And the church didn't really know what to do with it. It was given, when the church showed no interest, she gave it to the monastery of Downside, which is in the west of England near Bath. And they also didn't know what to do with it, so it stood empty and unused until 1934. Now, when these two priests I mentioned petitioned Pope Leo XIII, King's Lynn, which is a town 27 miles away, was our parish here, and much further as well. So it was decided that the new shrine that Leo XIII was allowing to be refounded would be the Lady Chapel of the Catholic Church in King's Lynn, which is built as a replica of the Holy House of Loretto. So that all happened in 1897. There were processions and things and devotions at that shrine through until 1934. In Walsingham, the Anglican vicar in 1931 established a shrine of their own, and it is thought that that spurred the Catholic Church into action about the Slipper Chapel. And Cardinal Bourne, who was the Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster, came on a pilgrimage with, it is reckoned to be 10,000 people, and he declared this chapel, it stood alone in a field at that time, to be the national shrine of Our Lady for Roman Catholics in England. The chapel itself is dedicated to St. Catherine of Alexandria, who in medieval times and still today is patron saint of pilgrims. And here we have her image on the left-hand side of the reredos behind the altar with the wheel of her martyrdom. It was called St. Catherine in the Dale. There are Victorian maps with it called the Shoe Chapel, Slipper Chapel. But the word slipper, I should explain, is a medieval word, slipe, which means next to. So it's the chapel next to Walsingham, the Slipe Chapel at Walsingham, which has just got familiarised in speech to be called the Slipper Chapel.
So the Holy Mile, in my own words, I would describe it as kind of like the spiritual Oxford Road of Walsingham, I would say, of England, because you get hundreds of people passing through there every week in the height of summer. And it really is a tradition that stretches back hundreds of years, ever since 1061, when the shrine was founded. And simply, where we have the Slipper Chapel at the Catholic shrine, that was, in its heyday, the final chapel where pilgrims would pray before going over to the Augustinian Friary, which is where we have the Lonely Arch and that sort of thing. And it's a very, we could say in one sense, a very prestigious tradition, a very regal tradition, because we had a lot of kings and queens go along that way, making penance, praying for themselves and for others. And it's still something that is held dear in my heart and to, I'm sure, many of the viewers, anyone who has been to Walsingham. And you often see a lot of people barefoot, and that's not some sort of medieval mumbo-jumbo, but it's a real thing because, of course, as we know, the Lord Jesus wasn't wearing anything on his feet when he was going across the Via Dolorosa. So it's kind of a modern-day embracement of that, of what happened in the medieval times, but even stretching before in the time of Jesus.
I think, well, I do it because it's one thing, it's what you do, but also it's because it's something that is so integral and central to the Walsingham experience. It's making that single mile of prayerful, contemplative reflection. And of course, there's so much to see in the shrine and do in the shrine, but that Holy Mile is special because you're moving, you're having a pilgrimage within a pilgrimage almost, and you're experiencing the scope, the land, the tread of Walsingham, and it's physical. And as you pray the rosary and you're walking and you're in nature, rain or snow or sun, you're experiencing what people have done for centuries, and it's something you don't not do it when you come to Walsingham. And again, you don't regret doing it because it's such a vital, central part to the experience of Walsingham.
For some, Walsingham is not just a place of pilgrimage. For some, it's the place they call home. So what's it like living in a place like this? And what's it like raising a family in the shadow of this holy place?
I feel so privileged to live here in Walsingham. We moved here a year ago to live in the centre of the village, and I sense that Our Lady has called me, or called us, my husband and our son, to live here. And as I live here, I'm beginning to understand more about that and more the privilege of that. I feel her more and more strongly each day as my mother, and how she is longing for me to say yes. So her fiat, she wants that to develop in me. I'll speak for myself, but I know it's my family are thinking about this, trying to think about this as we live here, but deepening our yes to her so that we can, find our sanctity in her and the healing of our hearts, healing of the wounds of our past. And we want to bring up our son. We have one son. We've had a lot of sadness and many miscarriages, but we're so grateful that we can bring up our son amongst other Catholics. He's got siblings effectively in his friendships here, and to help him to become a saint, really, and ourselves, And so we're always being given that reminder by being here in Walsingham. It's a great privilege.
Being here in Walsingham is unique, very unique. I've always had, growing up, a massive affiliation to Lourdes, and as a young child, I had a desire to have lived in Lourdes, and we've always, since being married, we've always desired to retire to Lourdes. And about it was just before I got ordained. My affiliation was still very much to Lourdes, although I came here as a wee lad every so often. When I was told or asked about a possibility of working here, it just came to light that actually, Our Lady is the same wherever we go, and that it must be an amazing calling to be able to work here. So since living here, it's been absolutely fantastic. Engaging with people on a daily basis, seeing why people come to Walsingham for various different needs, seeing that people are here for so many different reasons, to try and get that spiritual engagement with Our Lady.
Because my current life is so kind of ingrained in Walsingham and its spirituality, anytime I go off to London or to go back to my hometown or to visit my grandparents, I feel a bit empty in a sense. And I think in a way my life in a peculiar way has been sort of a bit drained of that a Marian presence, we could say, that Holy Family presence. So, and every time I come back, it's sort of, topped up. So I'd say for anyone coming here, if they need a boost of Marian love and piety.
Of course, there are also others who have been so drawn to this place that they have decided to stay, like the community of Our Lady of Walsingham, one of the new forms of consecrated life in the church. Today they run this retreat centre for the Catholic Shrine, offering hospitality and a welcome smile to pilgrims. The charism of this community is to promote and to spread the message of Walsingham to all those who come to this place. The leader and one of the novices of this community tells us more about their work.
Living in Walsingham is very special for us as a new religious community. We're one of the new forms of consecrated life in the church, and the inspiration for the community was actually received in the Slipper Chapel. So to be here at Walsingham is our spiritual home, and we couldn't be in a better place.
As a community dedicated to Our Lady of Walsingham, it's a real gift to be able to call it our home. It's our home spiritually as well as physically. So to be able to be here and minister and work alongside the pilgrims as well as the shrine is a great gift and a real privilege for us all.
When Bishop Alan Hopes invited the community to run Dowry House Retreat for the Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham, he invited us to run it on behalf of the Shrine, of the Diocese and of the nation. And our role was particularly to welcome pilgrims, retreatants to this beautiful place, to accompany pilgrims also who arrive at the shrine. Here at Dowry House is our main base, and we have retreatants that come over the weekends. We actually run retreats for people to come here, and we also welcome individual pilgrims who come for silent periods of time, for silent retreats, for individually guided retreats, which could last a few days or for a whole week. And we also offer hospitality to groups of pilgrims that come from parishes and might have their own retreat provider.
And it's not just religious who have been touched and inspired by the message and spirituality of Walsingham. Over the years, this place has inspired countless vocations.
As a young man who has been discerning for a number of years, I myself am looking to enter the Franciscans and to hopefully, within the order, become a priest. And that was part of my conversion or maybe reversion journey. And those men are really very holy in everything they do, and they've been a big part of my life. So if you get a chance to meet those Franciscan friars, I would say I'll give them a big thumbs up and say yes, please do.
And this is precisely why Walsingham remains such a popular place of pilgrimage today. Prayers are heard and answered here, and this is why people still flock to England's Dowry.
I think with any pilgrimage, I think with many spiritual things, that we're always aware that it's very easy to come with an agenda. It's very easy to come with expectations and to have clear ideas of what we want to get out of it and what we expect to get out of it. And very often our experience is that the Lord and Our Lady decide otherwise. So I'd say to people, if you're going on any pilgrimage, whether it's here or any other holy place, yes, go with your intentions, go with the things for which you need to pray and you have to pray and bear those people in your hearts. But to come ourselves with a very, very open mind and a very open heart, and to be submitting ourselves to God, expecting that we may get something from the pilgrimage which isn't what we were initially planning or expecting. I think openness is extremely important. You know, I've learnt over the years as a priest the hard lesson of trying to predetermine things and to project my expectations and my decided outcomes. We're so used to working to outcomes in our planning. Don't decide on outcomes. Decide on your intentions, but to come humbly and to submit and to accept what God brings, including the people that you're going to meet, the encounters, the conversations. Pilgrimage is always full of surprises, and I think if we can come relaxed in that sense, we really will discover new things. It has to be discovery in pilgrimage.
So here in the Anglican shrine at Walsingham, I think my favourite place would be the Holy House, which is within the shrine church, and it's like a small little chapel, which is a replica of the home of Mary and Jesus and Joseph from Nazareth. And the reason why it's my favourite is because you get a real sense of holiness there. It's small, it's intimate, and it's very simple, and it feels almost as though you are in Nazareth, in the place where Jesus himself was brought up. He was part of an ordinary home, an ordinary family, with Mary and Joseph living an ordinary life, and you get that sense of his humanity, which he shares with us, of course, as well as being the Son of God.
We come here regularly, well, as much as possible because of the distance. We just find that it helps us sort of relax and unwind, and just gives us some time to think about things, and it's quite a relaxing place to come, which you don't really have because we live in a city. You don't really have that sense of relaxation that you get when you come somewhere like here.
Walsingham is not only a place to learn about or to read about, it is a place to come and visit. So come and see it for yourself and leave your prayers at the foot of Our Lady of Walsingham in this place known as England's Nazareth.
I think to encourage someone to Walsingham, I'd say you won't regret it, because every time I've come to Walsingham, I've never regretted it. Even in the first time I came to Walsingham, which was when I was 17 for a U2000 retreat, and my first morning I woke up after 25 minutes sleep and a spider hanging from my sleeping bag just dangling by my mouth. And I remember thinking, where have I come? Where have I gone? My mother told me that I was going in a way that wasn't particularly kicking or dragging my feet, but it wasn't particularly my choice. But that was probably the first moment and only last moment of regret as I saw the spider dangling down to my face from the sleeping bag, because after that day was when I first encountered Christ in the year 2000 in August bank holiday, and every time since I've never regretted it. And obviously that's my story, and anyone else who's coming to Walsingham will have, I'm sure, very different stories, as we'll hear, I'm sure. But we can never regret coming to Mary, because she can only lead us to Christ, which is what she did. And so that will look different for different people, whether they're invited or whether they're kicking and screaming. They will not regret it. And I'd have to tell that story, because you can't just say you'll never regret coming to Walsingham. There's always a story behind that. Like there's a story behind everything in our lives. But you just you won't regret it. And Walsingham is such a special place for that invitation that Mary has for us.
If your life is busy and hectic, if you've got family at home, if you've got a busy job, just busy life in general, coming down here, even for the day, just gives you the chance to get away from that, clear your head, and spend some time with God and have that quality time of prayer and time to just reflect on everything.
Even if you're not religious, because of the history that's here. So certainly if you're from England, or if you're not from England and you enjoy history, then it's definitely a place of interest, architecture, but also if you are Catholic or Anglican or any religion, it's just a wonderful, peaceful place. It's very tranquil, and it's just a lovely place to go to retreat to if you like to have some peace and quiet and just completely relax.
So we thoroughly recommend Walsingham as a family, because it's such a wonderful combination of the spiritual uplift, but also it's 2 miles from the sea. So we find that we just do a very gentle pilgrimage, where we choose something every day, mass or time in the slipper chapel, and then we spend the afternoons at the beach in Wells. And it just works really well, because it's like a spiritual uplift for us, and then we're out on the beach with the children, and it's just a very, very relaxing holiday. It's only a couple of miles to the sea from here, and just beautiful walks out there, and you can take the train there as well, so you don't even need a car. You can do a train from Walsingham to Wells.
Pray the Rosary. Listen to the Mother's Call. Walsingham is an amazing golden nugget of the UK, and so many people will travel, especially from the north of the UK, to travel to Stansted Airport, to get on a plane, to fly to Medjugorje, to fly to Lourdes, to fly to Fatima, and forget to turn left and come to Walsingham. It's been the shrine in England for over 1,000 years. It's still going, and Our Lady still has the same message, which is to come and see the place where she said yes in the start of, in essence, Christendom. And Walsingham has got a very special message for every person who comes. I've not met one pilgrim who comes to Walsingham who has turned round and said they've not received anything from it. And it does draw people back in a very, very strange and subtle way.
One of the great things about looking back in our life, when we look back, we can see the movements of God in our life. We can look back at things that have happened in our life, and we realise, although we didn't know it at the time, that God's been moving in our life. And because we can look back with faith in the past, we then can see that God is working now in our life present, though we're not really aware of it, but he is, and will be in the future, and this gives us great hope. So why, in God's purposes, has Walsingham been restored? It's something to do with the re-evangelisation of England and Europe. In 50 years' time, people will look back on this period as we look back on the last 50 years, and they will see what God has been doing here more clearly than we can.
For Walsingham, this is my second time. I brought my mom the first time, in terms of she follows Walsingham online and she introduced me to it, and then obviously I brought the family as well. But it's a place of just reflection, calmness. Obviously you can have your confession, your masses, but it's just to be at peace and not in your hustle and bustle of life.
If I was trying to encourage other Catholics to come to Walsingham, I would talk about how it's such an important part of our heritage as English Catholics, and it's one of these places where you realise that being Catholic is actually part of our culture, because sometimes it feels like we live in a country where Catholicism is a bit alien and it's like a foreign import with Irish immigration or what have you, but actually the Catholic history in this country goes way, way back, and you come somewhere like here and you realise this is part of who we are as a nation.
Yeah, thinking about all the holy men and women who've travelled here and we're just following in their footsteps.
Walsingham, to me, is just such a wonderful place to come on pilgrimage, and I don't know if our country, the United Kingdom, knows how blessed we are to have Walsingham, which was one of the four largest and most popular shrines 1,000 years ago. Santiago, Rome, Jerusalem and Walsingham, they were the four shrines. We have this shrine here in the United Kingdom, and you don't have to go to Lourdes. You can go to Lourdes as well. You can go to all sorts of places, but come to Walsingham is what I would say to people if they want to find a place of great peace and to come close to Our Lady, who is longing for us to come close to her. It's very quiet. It's the quietness of her life in Nazareth. This is where she chose to say to Richeldis, who was the woman who had the dream and where the miracle occurred, she said, "Build my Nazareth." This is the way she was living quietly. She was quietly raising her son, and before he was 30 and he went into his ministry, and that's what she's doing with us. So if you come to Walsingham, there is a sense, I find there's a sense of she's quietly building us in our hearts, and building us to be ready to do the work that Jesus has for us to do here on earth, among other things, and to lead us to salvation. But it's so peaceful and it's beautiful as well.
I once had a cup of tea with a couple here at the shrine in the tea room, which is to my left. And they had come to Walsingham, not out of devotion, but out of curiosity. They were not Catholic, and they had met this young man in a restaurant who was the waiter, who started talking to them about it. So they came out of curiosity. So the first thing is that some people come to Walsingham because they know about it and they almost know what they want. Others come not knowing the first thing about the shrine. Of course, none of this matters, because each of us coming on pilgrimage to Walsingham has to ask ourselves, why are we here? Why has Our Lady drawn us here? What does God ask of us when we leave here? There is always some spiritual fruit out of a pilgrimage. Now, yes, of course, it's possible to leave a place and say, well, it's not made any difference to me. But of course, that was also the same at the time of Christ, that there were many people in the street who maybe heard what he said and saw what he did, and it had no effect on them whatsoever. But if we come with an open heart, there is some fruit, there is something God wishes to give us or wishes us to know, and that we go away changed. There is no such thing as a fruitless pilgrimage, provided we are open to what God wants us to have. Come.